Welcome back to the newsroom. You're watching live from Paris here on France 24. I'm Olivia Salazar-Winspear, and these are the top international stories this hour. A total rewrite for a controversial draft law here in France, with lawmakers agreeing to change a security bill after massive protests at the weekend and simmering anger about police violence. The epidemic is not over. On World AIDS Day, the WHO calls for global solidarity to maintain essential HIV services despite the spread of COVID-19. And the Amazon is being decimated at a perilous rate. The latest data out of Brazil shows that an area the size of Jamaica was lost over the space of a year, as scientists point to President Jair Bolsonaro for the surge in deforestation. We're starting off here in France, where lawmakers will review and rewrite a security bill that's seen tens of thousands take to the streets to a background of troubling acts of police violence. The country's interior minister, though, has said he refuses to withdraw the draft bill outright, underlining the importance of protecting security forces. Amid the growing controversy over police violence, President Emmanuel Macron and his government are increasingly being accused of pandering to the right wing, especially on security and policing. Erin Gunke has this report.
Emmanuel Macron was elected in 2016 as a centrist, vowing to transcend the left-right divide and appease voters of all persuasions. But now, more than 4 years into his mandate, observers say his once gradual shift to the right is accelerating, especially as it pertains to policing. For many, the Yellow Vest protests marked a turning point in relations between citizens and law enforcement under Macron's administration. The harsh repression of the demonstrations provoked criticism from international human rights organizations, which accused French police of excessive use of force.
During the Yellow Vest movement, 2 people have been killed during police operations, and 30 people have been mutilated by the use of plastic bullets. This bunch of evidence has very much irritated police unions.
A series of terrorist attacks further solidified the Macron government's rightward shift, with lawmakers from the ruling party proposing 2 pieces of hardline legislation. The first, which critics say targets Islam, would increase controls on Muslim civil society groups and ban homeschooling, while the second, also a security law, would make it a criminal offense to publish images of police officers with the intent to harm their physical or psychological integrity, a disposition critics say would make it much harder to hold officers accused of abuses accountable. Just days following the law's proposal, relations between French citizens and the police hit a breaking point, with investigations opened into at least 3 cases of police violence captured on video. Perhaps the most shocking, the seemingly gratuitous and racially tinged beating of a black man in his own music studio. Despite widespread outrage and mass protests against the new security law, the Interior Minister has reiterated his support for the police. Comments President Macron has reportedly criticized him for, accusing the minister of pouring gas on the fire.
Britain and France are stepping up their joint border controls in a bid to fight immigration. The UK says more migrants are trying to reach Britain ahead of the country's exit from the EU. UK Home Secretary Priti Patel and her French counterpart, Gérald Darmanin, signed a deal over the weekend which effectively doubles police patrols and uses new equipment to stop people crossing the channel illicitly. Well, the 1st of December marks World AIDS Day, and today an estimated 38 million people across the globe are living with HIV or have gone on to develop AIDS. While significant medical progress has been made, 1/3 of people infected don't have access to treatment. Organisations are also sounding the alarm over the impact that COVID-19 has had on both availability of healthcare and preventative measures. James Vecina has more.
It's a global fight that's been spanning decades, but this year it's been relegated to the background. Access to treatment for HIV has been hampered by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, good morning.
And health workers have been going door to door to make sure patients receive their antiretroviral drugs, or ARVs.
So for you to be able to fight this thing, this monster, this COVID-19, you must always take your medication same time every day.
I don't miss it.
Yeah, you must not forget this.
Many people have stopped going to crowded clinics, fearful of contracting COVID-19. And in South Africa, patients were left with little or no doses of ARVs after factories producing the drugs were forced to close during the nationwide lockdown.
For 2 months, I was using only one that I was supposed to use two. And if I don't use both of them, it's a big risk.
South Africa is the most affected country in the world, with 7.7 million people living with HIV. East and Southern Africa accounts for over half of all global cases. While significant progress has been made, with the number of AIDS-related deaths halved between 2000 and 2019, organisations warn that prevention targets set for 2020 have been missed, this even before the COVID-19 outbreak. And the chaos caused by the pandemic may have toppled previous efforts. UNAIDS estimates that there could be 70 to 150,000 additional AIDS-related deaths to what had already been forecast for 2020 to 2022, while infections could rise by up to 300,000.
Well, for some insight into the fight against the AIDS epidemic, I'm joined by Sarahwit Brooke-Landé, Director of Scientific and Medical Programmes at the SIDAction Association here in France. Ms. Brooke-Landé, thank you so much for speaking to us. Now, World AIDS Day traditionally marked a day when we were focused on the major global pandemic. But how has the presence of COVID-19 affected efforts to wipe out HIV and AIDS?
So the COVID-19 disaster or pandemic has actually shifted some of the mobilization around HIV/AIDS fights. And that is due because of the confinement and also because of the work that was carried out by infectiologists that had to work on HIV, that were working on HIV, who had to work on the SARS-CoV infection process. But that said, it also has highlighted the importance of really coordinated action to fight a world pandemic, and that has been a bit neglected the last several years. So this COVID-19 crisis has really put light on the fact that health is not a guaranteed factor, and that we all should be looking out for each other and so building a solidarity into fighting any kind of emerging infectious disease.
And in recent years, we've seen some really positive outcomes from HIV treatments, people living healthily with the virus for decades, and recently a handful of people reported being cured of HIV. Where would you say we're on the path towards a vaccine or a permanent cure?
So it's really an exciting moment now for HIV research, because we do have a lot of options in terms of treatment. We have a lot of treatment or antiretrovirals that have higher barriers of genetic barriers, meaning the people who are treated with these antiretrovirals would develop less resistance compared to older medications. We also have long-acting treatments that are about to get to the market, because these are the treatments where instead of taking daily pills, people could take injections every month or every 2 months, so that they would have the medication in their system, allowing the control of the virus, but not being forced to take a medication every day. We also have strategies where there's a lot of easing up on the daily medication, people taking 4 days instead of 7-day treatments. So those are really incredible tools, and also means to have a quality of life, a better quality of life for those that have access to treatment. There's also been a lot of information regarding the different vaccine strategies, because we happen to comprehend or understand better the interaction between the virus and our immune systems, allowing for 2 major strategies, vaccine strategies, that are in phase 3 trials right now, in order to be able to develop vaccines that would be preventing practically every subtype of the virus that are circulating in the world, and also using new technologies such as broad neutralizing antibodies that are being produced and being used as a perfusion to prevent the infection. So these major assays are happening worldwide, implicating people in Africa and also in Southern Asia, as well as Southern America. So it should have results, at least programmed results, around end of 2021. So that would give us a really current information on what is happening in terms of vaccine strategies. The third action, or the third axe of research, is really the cure research. Cure research is really targeted towards curing people that are living with HIV. As we all know, the virus could be controlled with the current treatments, but it's not eradicated. So the efforts right now around the HIV cure research is really to understand better in terms of allowing people to be able to control the virus without treatment, for one, or better yet, to be able to eradicate it without being forced to have any kind of transfer or cell therapy, which are very costly. And the two cases that you've mentioned in terms of cured people that are cured from HIV is due also because they've had a lot of medical intervention, which is not applicable to the 38 million people that are living with it right now.
Indeed, the challenges posed by treating large numbers of HIV patients, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, are not only financial, as you mentioned, but they become political too. How have you seen government policy affect progress in the fight against this epidemic?
So the government policies are incredibly important, and social mobilization around it. As we know, the infection is really, unfortunately, the high risk people are also those that are vulnerable to economical situations and also social situations, meaning the people that are discriminated against. Usually, there's a drug users or LGBTQI population, and also young women and adolescents in most African countries. So unless there's going to be a real policy in terms of inclusive policy protecting human rights and access to health, fighting HIV is going to be very difficult to get to the end of it. So that's why most of our organization is also fighting to finance and accompany research projects, but also to lobby and do a lot of advocacy in terms of guaranteeing access to health and respecting human rights for all individuals concerned.
Thank you very much, Sarawit Brooklande, speaking to us there on World AIDS Day. Next, eating away at the lungs of the world, deforestation in Brazil has surged to a 12-year high under President Jair Bolsonaro. Data from August 2019 to August 2020 shows that more than 11,000 square kilometres of the Amazon was destroyed. That's an area larger than Jamaica. The report comes from a Brazilian government agency and points to a 9.5% rise in logging. Our correspondent Tim Vickery told us more.
In 2010, Brazil drew up a national policy on climate change, and it established targets for deforestation. And the target has been exceeded more than 2.5 times, almost 3 times. So Brazil is massively off course to meet its commitments, according to the Paris Accord, to have zero deforestation by 2030. The government of Jair Bolsonaro is notoriously skeptical on climate change, but the victory of Joe Biden in the US presidential elections is leaving Brazil dangerously isolated. We had access to a presidential meeting in the height of the COVID crisis. It was the result of a legal process that was going on. And we saw clearly there the environmental minister. The environmental minister is very close to the agricultural lobby who are performing this deforestation. We saw him clearly there say that his government could take advantage of the coronavirus to push through some changes, some less restrictive environmental practices, while everyone's gaze was being focused on coronavirus. So you could clearly see there that this issue was not a priority. The combat of deforestation was not a priority for the Bolsonaro government.
Well, let's get a reminder of some of our top stories this hour. A total rewrite for a controversial draft law here in France, with lawmakers agreeing to change a security bill after massive protests at the weekend and simmering anger about police violence. Conflicting accounts in Ethiopia as the government claims a bloodless victory in the Tigray region, while the local leader of the TPLF says his forces are still battling the national army after weeks of fighting. Aid groups believe 1 million people have been forced to flee the region. And Indian farmers take to the streets in protest at new agricultural laws amid fears that grain prices will end up in the hands of private buyers with an end to state guarantees. Meanwhile, the government has invited union representatives to the negotiating table.